Hi, I'm Anne. 1968 is known for being a time of great turmoil throughout the world. From the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, uprisings against the Soviets in Eastern Europe, and the war in Vietnam, and the peace protests that took place around the world. But at the time, I was a 4-year-old girl in a small town in upstate New York. So I was oblivious to a lot of those cares of the world. But in our home, we had a turmoil going on of our own. A couple of years before this, my parents had divorced and my dad had moved out, so things were pretty tough. I had 4 brothers and sisters much older than me. And my oldest brother, Alan, had graduated from high school in 1966. And he was like the all-star basketball captain, handsome, and, everyone loved Alan. But when he graduated from high school, the family didn't have money to send him to college. So his number was coming up in the draft. So Alan decided to sign up into the Marine Corps. So 4-year-old girl, I idolized him. And, everyone in the family did it. The household kind of revolved around him because he's so dynamic. But when he was gone, things were very quiet. And my memories of the time are very much of my mother and I at home. My brothers and sisters were probably in school or at friends' houses, and I'd be pottering around the house, following my mom around, my little mini-me that I was of my mother. And if the phone would ring or anyone would come to the door, I'd be following right behind her. Who is it? Who is it? But during this time, the radio or the TV would be on almost constantly because with a son in the Marine Corps at the time, my mother was constantly wanting to hear news of what was going on with the war. Was there going to be a peace agreement coming on or anything? And again, I'm so little, I don't know the details of what's going on, but I know that there's really something going on and that my mother's concerned almost all the time. So, as I said, many days I'm home alone with my mom while everybody else is away out of the house, and the phone rings. So as usual, I'm right behind her, like, who is it, who is it? And she picks up the phone, and you could just see the delight on her face. And she turns to me and said, Alan's on his way home. And I was like, oh, I can't believe it, Alan's coming home. I was so excited. I ran out the door, and I ran up the street, and anyone that I met along the way, I was just like, Alan's coming home, Alan's coming home. Like dancing, skipping up the street. There were all the old folks that were sitting out on their porches that I usually would visit during the day when I went out. You could just see the looks on their faces when they saw me because I was just so happy, just screaming like, Alan's coming home, Alan's coming home. And I ran all the way back down. Now, I don't remember the exact timeline of what had happened, but in my memory, I ran into the house, and there he was sitting in an armchair with my mom sitting across from him. And I remember how he looked at that moment because it was just like, there he is. When we'd been wondering, when's he going to come home? Will he be able to come home? And he's sitting there so handsome, wearing his green combats, that they would be wearing just, out of boot camp, white T-shirt. And I remember him drinking a Coke. It was hot. And I just ran and jumped into the chair with him. And my mom said, oh, Anne, leave him alone. And he said, oh, Mom, that's okay. And I was just like, yay. And I looked up at him and was studying his face and looked down, and he had on those really shiny, black combat boots. Now, and I don't remember any other details of that visit, but he would have gone back to boot camp or wherever he was going, and he did eventually get sent over to Vietnam. So again, the constant radio or TV on, my mom's constant concern over what is going on, and at that time, and if the phone would ring, if anyone would come to the door, what's the news, because it's not like today where you have almost instant access to information. News traveled, your only sense of, news and what's going on is what you would hear on the TV news at night. But again, the phone rings, so I'm following my mother, who is it, who is it? But this time, she answers the phone and collapses because the news isn't quite the same. This time it is, Alan's been injured. He's in Vietnam. So after that point, the concern turns to, Is he going to get to come home? How extensive are the injuries? But all I knew was, something terrible was going on. People were coming in and out of the house, bringing dishes, food like people do. My mom kind of staying in one room, people trying to keep me away from her. And, it was just, you can imagine what it would be like, and me trying to figure out what's going on, at the time. But then things did kind of settled down a little bit. A couple of days had gone by, and there was a recruiter that used to come and visit us. I guess the recruiter station was just a couple of blocks from our house, and he used to come and talk to my mom, because she was so concerned. And so I noticed we had a glass, like French doors in the front of the house, and he came up to the door, and I was like, why is Martin coming to the front door? He always comes in through the back door. And then right behind him was another man in uniform, and then our local priest. So at that point, my mom would have known, I wouldn't have known right away, but that Alan wasn't going to be coming home again. So again, things changed in the household, very somber in those days. That the turmoil that had been happening across the world was happening in our own household. And then a short while later, those little blue envelopes that they used to use for airmail, again, a thing of the past, I think, arrived. And it was a letter, and it was addressed to Anna Banana. And it was for my birthday, because my birthday had happened just a couple of weeks before then. And it said, "Dear Anna Banana, happy birthday. What you going to be for Halloween? I hope you're not going to be a monster." And there was a picture inside the letter, and it was Alan sitting on his bunk in his green combats, in his white T-shirt, with his black, he was shining his combat boots. So I have that picture and that memory of him at that time.